Welcome, everyone. Thank you for being here. I think we will start slowly, and as people come in, they will join the room. We can see them coming in, which is very exciting. So, thank you all very much for being here. Really great to see you all. If my enthusiasm isn't being communicated through the virtual mode, then really very excited that we're getting to do this. And we've started this off. So the idea of Young Investigator Huddle was actually stemmed from our Young Investigator meeting at Gandhinagar, Ahmedabad, where Young Investigator, we were all sitting and chatting, as networking happens in the YIMS. And members of the community said, it's so great that we meet every year and get to talk about everything related to doing science in India, life sciences in India, being young investigators in India. I wish we could do this more often, And the India Bioscience team, we all left with the idea that how could we do this more often? And that's when Huddle, the idea came to us all. And we said, maybe we have an online space where young investigators, postdoctoral fellows, PhD researchers, pretty much anyone associated with the life science community in India can hang out, quite literally. And then we structured it into topics of relevance. And so here we are. So thank you all for being here. Thank you to Anindita, Durba, and Rohan for accepting our invitation to launch, to kick off the first huddle with us. We are looking forward to it. And thank you to the India Bioscience team for all the work we did in putting this together. So we have a series of huddles planned out, starting with today, which is the first one, where we'll talk about really right at the very beginning. We are all postdoc fellows and we train in running our research projects, and how do we expand it into running a program with multiple projects, multiple directions, including now teaching, administration, and institutional contribution. So big plate, quite literally, both for the webinar and in real professional life. But Why Huddle is a series I'm sure we're going to enjoy today. But our next one, we're going to dig deep into what matters, money, when it comes to running our research groups. And for that, we are joined by grants officer Vandana from ICSIR Pune, and Poonam from ICSIR Thiruvananthapuram will be leading it. You can get to our website and see the plan for the next huddles. We've planned 12 of them. So it's going to be a year-long journey till we meet again at the next Young Investigator meeting. All right, so thank you very much. I did say this was no slides, it was conversational, it was casual, and I mean it. We are going to stop sharing our slides and now put the focus on Rohan, Durba, and Anindita. Importantly, this is a conversational session. So if you have questions, please keep typing them in the chat window, and all three of them will take them intermittently. So let's keep the chat window active. Welcome, and let's get going.
Right. Yeah. Thank you, Karishma, and the India Bioscience team for organizing this. I think it's going to be a very useful series for all the young investigators as well as postdocs who are, aspiring to transition into principal investigators. So a very warm welcome to all the participants for the series today. What I'm going to do is I'll briefly introduce our guests today, that is Anandita and Durba, and then we'll get started with the conversation. So briefly talking about Anindita Bhadra, she did her PhD on vast politics at IISc and then moved on to set up the dog lab at ICSIR Kolkata. Her lab studies behavior, ecology, and cognition of stray dogs in India. She was the founding chair of INEAS, and she's also served on the executive committee and as a co-chair of the Global Young Academy. She's actively engaged in science outreach and has served for 3 years as the associate dean of International Relations and Outreach at ICSIR Kolkata. She's a mother of 2 and an active thespian. So a very warm welcome to Anandita, who's going to be one of our guests. The second guest that we have for today is Durba Sengupta. Durba is at the National Chemical Laboratory in Pune. She heads a team of interdisciplinary researchers working in the broader areas of computational biology and multi-scale simulations. In particular, she and her team are trying to identify molecular mechanisms of processes such as membrane protein dynamics and protein lipid interactions using computational approaches. Her previous research work was in Germany and Netherlands, where she did her PhD and postdoc respectively. So you can see we have a pretty diverse set of guests today on our conversation, and So we are very happy to have them. So let's get the ball rolling. I think the very first question, when we think about starting out as a young investigator and the phase of transition that happens from a postdoc to being a young PI is, identifying focus areas or thrust areas on which the research group is going to focus on. So I would like to ask the two of you, was there a particular approach in identifying the focus areas that you would like to work on? Was there a singular focus area that was the main theme of the lab, having multiple directions under that focus areas? How was your approach? This question is for both Anandita and Durba.
Yeah, Anindita, you want to go first because we have two completely
want to go first?
Yeah, sure.
I think I missed out.
Hello.
Yeah.
No, I think, yeah, Anandita?
Yeah, so as you mentioned, I did my PhD at IISc on WASP politics. So I still wanted to do animal behavior, and I did not want to move out of the country because when I finished my PhD, I had a 1-year-old son, and that was my primary objective, keeping the family together. So I had a slightly different trajectory from most people. I didn't go away for a postdoc. I actually continued for a stint in my own lab as a postdoc, and then I applied here. So when I was deciding on what I wanted to do, I wanted to work on a species which is easily available in India, and where I will not need to have a lot of paperwork to do to get permissions and stuff, because I was at the Center for Ecological Sciences, and I knew what my friends were going through when they needed permits to go to the forest and do field work. So I wanted to do animal behavior, I wanted to do field work, but I did not want to have all of the trouble with the paperwork, and I had a little boy to think about, and I also wanted to teach very actively. That's why I was applying to the ISERs. And then I started thinking, and for me, it was basically, okay, what are the kinds of questions that interest me? What are the kinds of animals I find interesting? And that is how I converged on the dogs, because I've always loved dogs. I've interacted with dogs on streets, and I found them very interesting. And I have always been reading a lot of dog literature, of where a lot of work is happening in the US and Europe. And I could see that people are doing interesting work with pet dogs in labs, and they're drawing a lot of conclusions about dog evolution, the evolution of the human-dog relationship. And it always bugged me that, these are dogs which have been raised by humans inside their homes, and then they're brought to a lab in an artificial environment with the owner, and then they're given things to do. And based on this very unnatural setup, a lot of conclusions are being drawn. Why don't people study stray dogs? The stray dogs can do a lot of things. They are very interesting. They're very smart. They live in groups, and nobody seems to be studying them. And that's how I came up with my research question. So a lot of things kind of converged on the dogs.
Right. Yeah. Durba, what about you?
So I think, first of all, I should thank you, Rohan, and Karishma and the entire India Bioscience team before I go further, because I think these are some of the questions that irked us all. Often by the time we reached here, we have the answers, but nobody talks about the journey that we took to get to the answers. And I think for many people who are already at the YI stage, they've thought it through. But I think in the audience, there are also postdocs who are thinking of the transition. And the idea is that automatically, when we think of it, we leverage what we know to do what really excites us, and that can be put in many different ways. So it could be a new method you have developed, which was the case in my case, to apply it to systems that really excite you. But for lots of experimentalists, because the system is much more important, it could be the system that you know very well, and then leverage new methods that you want to get to answer that question. And I think in this case, it's also important to know that you need to focus because, the world is open. You can work on whatever you want. And different people really, it is exciting and you want to do that. But you have to know where you draw that line, where is it that that's what excites me and I want to go there? And where is it that I finish what I want to do and then go there? And I think that's a very tough decision as a YI in the first days, weeks, months, and years. You maybe start with something that you've thought of. Most places now, when you're a YI, you have to write a nice proposal. It's already been flooded by lots of questions. You've been going to different institutes, you've been going to different granting agencies, independent of where you are in the world, including India. And a lot of those ideas are already, walked through. Like you've already kind of talked about it. But, use that. Don't get bored of it, because this is another thing I hear a lot, like, oh, I've already said so much about it. Now this is the new thing. Let me try this, because it's easy to get to the new sweet shop, but it's important to leverage what you know to do what is exciting for you, in short.
Yeah, I think that's a really nice perspective to look at it. And there could be, multiple approaches of arriving at what you would want to focus on in your research group. So I think, and it's also a very personal approach, I feel. Depending on what has been your trajectory in your PhD or during your postdoc, and then deciding on what you would like to do in your research group. So I think that's, yeah.
So while it is a personal decision, I think there are certain pointers and take-home messages which are important for everyone, because, it may work out, but there's still the law of percentages that, what works for the maximum. You should be aware of that, and then go with your personal touch to it. That's why I said leveraging it, because you leverage what you know, of course, and it's your journey. But there's still some things that, it's good to know that this is what has worked for other people.
Right.
And, move on with that. Right? Because if you say everything is our personal journey, then I think people tend to broaden up a lot, saying, okay, or focus too much in something which may not be relevant in this particular case, right? I think Anindita put it really well to say about stray dogs, because that's really a niche that she has, and only she has,
I think identifying your niche is really important, because, in some fields which are very crowded, you need to really have something that's really unique for your research program that only you are doing, even though the field per se is crowded and there are many people who are working on the same system or on the same problem. The approaches could be different. The questions have to be unique. So there are multiple things probably.
I think another thing that just struck me, Rohan, while you were saying about crowded field, is that, often you work in postdoc laboratories or PhD laboratories that are very well funded, are really doing cutting edge research. But, you have to accept it that as a YI, you are not going to start making a mark, which could be publishing or other ways, for a few years. So, you have to think what will be that niche in 2 years down the line or 3 years down the line, rather than today, because you may have this fantastic idea, but by the time you set up your lab and do everything, that time may be gone. So that's another thing.
In fact, I've seen a lot of my colleagues who have come here, especially after a stint of postdoc or PhD abroad in the global north. And then, they find it very difficult once they come here that, you pick up a phone and order something, it doesn't come to your desk. You have to go through all the processes, and they find it so frustrating. But that is part of the learning, that things will not start immediately. People will say, okay, I've joined 6 months and I've not started a single experiment yet, but you have to understand that, things take time. And it's very different from, getting into a lab and working there directly.
Yes.
Versus, starting from scratch and building from ground zero.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think we have a related question in the chat box from Aditya Parekh. He asks, would love to hear y'all discuss one important challenge that you have faced when starting your first research project. Was it a scientific challenge or more of a technical challenge when you started off?
I think percentage-wise, most people will say technical. I really think so. At least at the start, it's always technical, because you are faced with so many things that you think worked but do not work, because you are set, often you just start with an empty space. And it's really about being nimble to fit in all that. And it's often technical rather than scientific, because, in some ways you have already thought out the scientific question for about 6 months to a year before you actually work it out. So, yeah.
So actually, again, from not my personal experience, but from looking around, a lot of young people starting, because in the ISERs, when I joined, the ISERs were new, and many of us were joining and starting their labs. And what I could feel is, especially for people who are into experiments, which need equipment, fully functional laboratories, it's basically the logistics which were a problem, because you want to buy something, it takes so much time in the procurement process, setting up a laboratory, getting the space, everything, all of that is not part of the science, but part of the process itself, which becomes a big issue. So starting off, you want to start your experiment from day one, but it takes you 1 year to get there.
Yes, absolutely. All right. So, okay, there's one more question that's popping in. My struggle has been from looking at the ins and outs of the data and the code to watching students do it and observe secondhand. How does one figure this out?
Going from one side of the table to the other side of the table.
Yeah,
I know. It feels like, okay, fine, I'll do it. But okay, having come so far, I think now I'm in a position where I can actually hand out advice from experience. And personally, I never had this problem for a very different reason, part of my training, but I have again seen people go through this. And my personal advice to anyone who feels this is, let it be, because your students also need to learn. And this is part of our training, because we need to learn to be a teacher and to be a supervisor from being a student and doing everything on our own, because we are here to now train our students to do what we can do. So if we think that, okay, I'll do it better, I'll write the paper, I'll do the analysis, and it'll happen faster, maybe it'll happen faster, but your students will not become efficient enough. And there you are not going to excel as a mentor. So, it's like also you have to train yourself to resist this temptation and help them to learn rather than do things for them.
Yeah.
Yeah. So on this, maybe I just wanted to add that while Anandita, I mean, that's absolutely true, but it can be frustrating. And in a lot of places when you don't have, many of the PIs that are joining now, the young investigators, they're still in temporary positions. It could be through a tenure track, it could be through fellowships. And, you want to hurry that up, and you want to have that thing going, because you say, look, if I do it, it'll take me half an hour. If I explain to someone, it'll take them 10 days to do it, someone new, right? Because you are the best trained person in your group, right now.
So my solution always has been to kind of work as a team with my students. And, in ISERs, when we started, we had undergrads working on projects and fresh students coming in. So they were really untrained. So what we would do often is, we would sit down and brainstorm and work together, rather than me saying, okay, fine, I'll just do it, guys, let it be. So that is at least how I worked around this problem, because I have gone through this phase. I was on a temporary position and I was being continuously thrown out of the institute and struggling to stay put. So it was a hard time, but yeah, it can work.
I think both of us started our lives as fellows and getting to that. And I think maybe I'm trying to go back and think of some strategies for it. And I think one of the things was maybe to use time more efficiently, maybe not, have two parallel tracks, one where you really train and, your first students, you really train them, you really do something. But then there are the low hanging fruits or something which you can be very efficient and getting done quickly, which may be two parallel projects or two parallel things that you feel that, okay, look, I'm spending this time, because you also need to let the people you mentor on their own for a while. And in that time, you go back and, go back to doing that and getting that one parallel work out independently, or, that could be a sub project within the larger project or something.
Right.
So maybe different strategies work in that way.
Yeah. So moving on from setting up focus areas for your research program, I think having a research program, having various focus areas itself is a very daunting task, and having people with a diverse expertise who can work with you on these research problems that you're trying to address in the group becomes very important. Here comes the role of having collaborations, setting up collaborations. So was there a way that, you organically developed collaborations, or you went out there looking for collaborators who can help you with some of the research problems that you were addressing? And did it contribute to the research program that you're currently running, in terms of collaborations or making new collaborations?
Yeah. So actually, yeah, I think collaborations have been a large part of my journey. And especially being someone who's mostly at the other end of the computer, we collaborate with different kinds of people on different aspects. And just as an anecdote, the first few days, basically I started 2 parallel programs already. One was, which I had thought of, which I planned to do. It was based on a new field we wanted to go into, new systems. And the other was a very chance meeting with a collaborator, and those two have been really side by side. One got all the original funding of the fellowships, and the other was just us doing things. But I had an amazing PhD student who was also got very excited by that and went through that. And it was really a very chance meeting over a coffee at a conference just before I joined. And I said, okay, hang on, I'm coming back. And that goes to the next part, which is I want to make networks. I want to meet people. I'm not someone who necessarily used to network a lot originally, but that's something you have to learn. So when you come in, you leverage that. You say, okay, I met you at this conference. Can I just come by and talk to you? And that's really where over the next 10 years, we have been collaborating and working on that thing. And that was really not the one where our initial funding was. But that just became really exciting and really interesting, and we let the surprise happen. And the other one, which was our bread and butter that I thought we would be working on when I started off, that happened, and in that we didn't get so many good collaborations. We tried to collaborate with different people, but I think we had very set ideas of what we wanted or how we wanted to go about it. And then there were the clashes with the collaborations. And the other one, we were a lot more open, and that just happened much more organically. And I think both things, you need to balance both.
Right. What about you, Anandita?
So I have hardly collaborated with people because firstly, when I started out, I did want to find collaborators to do different kinds of stuff other than just behavior. But then people would be like, you look at dogs. Dogs, stray dogs, the ones in streets. And then, I was like, I want to do their genetics. I want to do their physiology. And they're like, dogs are, well, no, not really, And soon I figured out that it doesn't work, and I gave up. So for a long time, I have not collaborated with people, only again, one chance meeting at a conference where somebody was working on pet dogs, and we started talking, and she's like, oh, wow, you work on strays. We don't have strays in the US, and, why don't you try this experiment with strays and see what happens? And one of those things happened, and we did a couple of experiments and got a couple of papers out of it. But it has always been very, on and off, because somebody wants to do something which they have done on pets, and they would try to see how we respond to that. And another collaboration is happening right now, but most of it we've been working on our own.
I see. Okay.
But I think this is one area, and Rohan, maybe you can have some ideas here as well. I think this is one area which is very critical if you work in certain areas more than if you work in other areas,
Right.
And you will have a lot larger impact if you do it together, but you'll also learn from each other and inspire each other.
Absolutely.
If you do it.
It's and these days, we are always talking about interdisciplinary thinking and research, and it's so much more important to have a network of people working together than people working in isolation.
But Anindita, you hit the head on of the nail when you said that it also depends on who you're collaborating with. And this is, I think, one of the questions: how do you make collaboration sustainable? And that's a part where I've seen a lot of different people have issues. I mean, I've had great collaborations and I've had terrible collaborations, literally dog fights or worse. Sorry, Anandita, for using that idiom. But, I think it's about how much both people come to the table with an open mind, and how much both people are willing to look at the science rather than their part of the science,
Absolutely.
and that's something, so often I think that it's better to collaborate with people whom you can talk to, rather than someone who has just the perfect instrument you need for something, or something else. I think that part is often more that, over time, it'll all come to the same plate. But, especially as YIs, you have to balance a lot, because you may be collaborating with someone who you may have an idea and they may just not take it on board, or worse, they may take your idea and run with it, and you'll just be slower. And it has happened. It has happened to people working in certain areas, like which are crowded areas, non bio, cell bio. You have a lot of people, sometimes it's really the idea which is makes a difference, and so it really has to be, I think, if you want to make them sustainable, you have to have that feeling that both people are on board,
Right.
and people are on the same page, and you have to trust your instincts. And if you feel it's not going okay, you have to step back from it before. So, and let it happen partly organically. I think that works better than forcing it, because I've seen too many of these, oh, I should collaborate with so and so thing, which never works out.
Yeah, forced collaborations. Yeah. But I think somewhere, pursuing it also becomes very important, because often what happens is you tend to chat with someone over a coffee and then the idea flies, but then it doesn't really take off, because it's not possible. I mean, we all are busy people. I mean, let's be, we have a number of things to do, and pursuing it becomes a problem, and if it's really organic and if it has developed in such a way that both the parties are having a say in it or are interested in the problem, then I think it becomes more easier to pursue this kind of a collaboration. I think that's very important to keep in mind.
I've heard some people use this phrase, oh, I'll ask a student to join it or put a student on it. I hate that phrase,
Right.
because it has to be about discussions, but I've heard it once too often from people in certain areas. Again, I will not say what, because it's like treating people like a pair of hands rather than getting them for their ideas and thoughts. And
that's very common, I guess.
And especially at the beginning, it has to be a lot of discussions, it has to be, make sure that both of you are on the same page before you can go ahead with it. And that really needs people to talk to each other. I think that's important. Communication and talking at the beginning itself. Then, yes, time is limited, you all have different things, somebody will do the technical part of it and, push it every day.
Right.
It works. But the beginning part is critical, and communication is the key.
No, and as you said, we really should collaborate based on the science and not, how many papers and who becomes the first author and things like that, because then it's a business deal. It's not really a collaboration, and it doesn't work. So it's not sustainable.
Yeah. Durba, there's a specific question for you that has come in. What advice you would give to bioinformaticians to have fruitful collaborations with experimental biologists and clinicians?
Talk their jargon. I've heard too many people say, oh, I don't know this because I'm from this background, right? Oh, I'm a physicist, I don't know any biology. That doesn't work at all. Or I code, I don't care what your protein is. That doesn't work. You have to learn to talk that jargon of whatever it is. Some of it is very much, it's also chance. We started collaborating or trying to collaborate with someone. This was a private research institute run by CIPLA. We had a really great idea. We had a great team. We had everything. And then CIPLA just cut the funding of that institute entirely. So it's, especially at the other end, you don't know what will happen, but I think the whole journey is together. So definitely speak their jargon, go and learn from that. What is it, they want to know, and learn to say it in simpler words. Because I think many of the people I collaborate with who are, cell biologists or other kinds of experimentalists, I at least try to explain the methods that I use in terms And I'm not belittling
Right.
them, but that is explainable to them. There's no point in if I use a jargon, because it means I don't understand it myself either, and they should be able to give talks based on what the data you've given them. They should understand it so well that they should be able to own responsibility for that, even though
Correct.
that's your part of the work. And that's really where it becomes organic. And the first work that you do together should really open the next question that you can then follow up. Otherwise, you may do one part of the work together and that's the end of it, and that never generates more ideas. And I think we say we do good science if we ask more questions at the end of it than at the beginning of it, because that just means you're building that pipeline into it.
Yeah. Another question that I found interesting was, how do you balance having collaborations while launching your own research program, Because so the person says, I feel nervous committing to many collaborations in my initial phase. Would love to have advice, because it's a part of the thing, you cannot commit to too many collaborations.
Absolutely. Time is of essence, and this is something that has to be. You have to multitask. That's the very job of being a PI, and yet you have to focus, And I think the same thing holds true for collaborations, that really your day will go in purchase, in admin, in student evaluations, in teaching, in all kinds of things, which is not really your science. And you still have to find time for that science and, put in all the pieces of the jigsaw puzzle together. So if you think that jigsaw puzzle helps you, go for that collaboration. And it should also help that person, because the same piece has to be part of two separate puzzles for it to be sustainable. If it is that you're taking their piece away for your work, or that they are taking a piece away, that is not a sustainable collaboration. It has to be the same identical piece that fits the picture you are painting and fits the picture they are making, or the puzzle they are making. It has to be both. Otherwise, there's no point in collaborating. And that's when you start thinking whether it's too many, too few, or things like that. If it's something that's helpful to you for your work, and at the same time they want it, go for it. It doesn't matter whether it's 1 or 10. However, if it becomes that, okay, I'll just make the side puzzle here, or I'll just paint an extra flower here in my painting, although it's of Antarctica, I'll just paint a pretty flower, it doesn't work. So,
right. Yeah. All right. Moving on to building a research team, building your own research group per se in terms of recruitment. Was there a particular strategy that either of you followed while recruiting people for your research group? Was there, you wanted people of a particular expertise to join your team initially, or were you looking for, a particular kind of staff, basically? What was the team building essence that you followed?
Anandita, go first. I think your strategy will be completely different.
Absolutely. That's why we have to.
It was primarily, I wanted to work with people who are interested in the field, because again, doing animal behavior, working in the field, especially the kind of work that we do. The first thing that I tell students when they come and say, I want to work with you, I'm like, you sure you want to work with me? You have to be on the streets. You have to, be running behind dogs, and there are going to be people asking you all kinds of questions. The number of anecdotes that the students in the lab have accumulated over the years, it's quite amazing. I want to write a book out of it. So, there's going to be a lot of non-science which you have to deal with on a day-to-day basis. So that's the first thing I ask them. And in fact, even before that, the first thing I really ask is, how do you respond to dogs on streets? Are you scared of dogs? You hear a bark, you go the other way, then please don't come to my lab. So that's the first thing. And typically people who come to me are dog lovers. And then I have to ask, are you okay to work on streets, long hours, summers, rain, winter, all kinds of weather? So, and then for me, it has always been kind of a personal connection, which has worked. And I've been very lucky with my students, because I must say that, every student I have a very strong relationship with. And we, over the time, of course, it develops. But initially, when they come and I feel like, okay, we talk, about all kinds of things, not just the science. And then if it works, it works. So I often would tell students, why don't you come here, spend some time in the lab, hang around, see if this works for you, if there's the kind of work that you would really like to do, and only then decide to join. It has become easier now, of course. Initially, when you really want to find a student and you want somebody to work with you, it was more like, to be frank, the first person who came to the lab and said, I wanted to do this, I was like, okay, why do you want to do this? She said, okay, I love animals, I love dogs, and I'm doing a job and my family wants me to stick to this government job. I'm bored, want to run away from this job, and I do something more interesting. I said, okay, fine, come join, and then we'll see. And she eventually joined on a project, and we went on for quite some time. So it was primarily, their interest in the work that we do. So for me, that is, I think, the most important part, because if you're not interested in the kind of work, if you're not interested in the questions, then you are just going to be, working for the papers or the degree, and it doesn't work because it's not sustainable. You really have to be in love with the science to be able to persist in a field like ecology. So for me, that was the primary criteria.
Yeah. So instead of answering this, maybe I'll start with an anecdote. This was an anecdote from Yamuna Krishnan when she had come to NCL. Mm-hmm. And she was saying that, the first set of students she had, right? She joined NCBS. Famously, NCL rejected her. I shouldn't say this, but anyways, we also rejected Har Gobind Khurana. We don't do bio, supposedly. Thank God we rejected Har Gobind Khurana, right? I mean, anyways, coming back to the point. So the point she was putting across is that, she's a trained chemist, or supposedly. And the first set of students who approached her said, look, or rather she approached them, because I think this is a big difference between research institutes like NCL or NCBS versus ISOs, that we don't have a larger set of students around, so you go approach them, and they said, oh, but we can't join your lab because we are not chemists, we are biologists, and she said she worked with them, she got them excited, she did a lot of things, and then a couple of years later she again heard some students saying, look, we are chemists, we heard you only take biologists, So, and that's really been also in some ways a theme in my lab, because we have a lot of very interdisciplinary people. We have people from, microbiology, zoology, biotechnology, of course, bioinformatics, chemistry. I have had a lot of great postdocs with physics backgrounds. We had people who are engineers. I'm trying to woo some more engineers who want to come by, and so the question is, of course, about passion, but also about the perspective, because, it's okay if you have a degree in mechanical engineering, but if you don't really care about proteins or membranes or how anything would want to work at a molecular level and you find it boring, don't come, you right. May code amazingly well, but that's fine, and at the same time, if you're a biologist, I mean, my first PhD student who actually did really well was from a microbiology background. He had no clue of coding. He had probably no idea what is a simulation, but he was just so fascinated with some of the questions that we were asking, and he wanted to put in the effort to learn all that. So he actually went and did all the maths courses and coding courses, not once, twice, thrice, because of course he had left maths way back in class 10 as a microbiologist, but he needed all that. So you really need to have people with that passion. Yeah. And sometimes people say they have it, and it has happened to me, but you soon realize that they don't really have, they say they can do, and this is something I hear a lot of people, kar lenge, but then you realize they can't, because the passion and all of that is really lacking. And then you have to know when to also say goodbye. So it's not just about recruiting them, it's also about retaining them, because that sets the tone of your group. And the same research problem, when you have different people working on it, based on their perspective, they'll do different things on it, absolutely different things, And so you need to remember and remind yourself that each time, and tune yourself each time. And while passion is important, it has to show in a much more sustained manner in a very large way. I think we lost Rohan. Maybe I said too many things and he got scared.
No, we did lose Rohan. We did lose Rohan. He'll be back. I'm pretty sure he'll be back. We didn't say anything to upset him. I have been following this conversation. All right. I think Rohan is coming back, but I will just step into my previous life of being a young investigator, which was only 3 months ago.
Yes.
All right. So, okay, let's deal with the elephant in the room, with so much going on, collaboration, students, research focus areas. What about purchase, equipment, consumables, field work? How and when how did you navigate all of this? And what are the biggest lessons you've learned from all of this? If someone had to ask you, either of you. So this is a huge thing to talk about.
Yeah, I think I had it a little bit easier. And I keep saying this every day. I don't know how lab experimentalists deal in my institute, because I'm sorry, it is absolutely different. And, we had actually colleagues first day, they probably don't remember, but they sat me down with a whiteboard and gave me pads and said, this is what and how it works out. And this is what you need to do. And they threw all these terminologies at me, indent, OM, I don't know, tender, whatever. And I had no clue, but I had written down my notes like a very good student, and every day I would go back to those and look at it. But I think it's really important that, I think the day would go in doing all this. And I would really try to carve out time for myself to do the science and the creativity of the science. And that to me was very important. So at the beginning, I would just, run away to cafes, even just leave everything and run away. And that's where I would write down my grants or my papers. All my first papers from NCL are written in multiple cafes in and around here. Karishma, there's all of Baner, all of our beautiful places.
But I need some recommendations.
Yes, Peter Donut, that's great. They have nice Wi-Fi. It works. It worked all the time. And that's where literally my first papers were written. And, sometimes you realize that if you just run away, some things may not work, but at the end of it, you can go and push them to work again, saying that, look, I wasn't there, this needs to be done or something. And that's really tough, setting up a lab from scratch. Yeah. It is. And it is going to be the toughest thing that you do as a YI, depending on the institute, depending on the support, depending on what your needs are. You have to spend, because that is something you can't do by yourself. You need the support staff of the institute, you need people to understand what you need and why you need it. Why should they just spend 1 crore on something when their salaries or whatever of the guy who's signing off is a fraction of it, well, as are ours, but still,
Certainly.
You have to make those personal things. And this is something that really helped at the beginning, making those connections, personal connections, the support staff in the institute, and making them understand what has to be done. And that has to be done in the time that they are there. So 9 to 5, no science is going to get done. This is what is going to get done. You have to somehow fit in the science within that. That's why I said cafes, before, after, somehow in your head, plan out that part. But it is difficult.
So I think good to hear, very honestly, Durba, Anindita, I'm sure you agree.
I know you have the same thing, right? We were just talking about it before, yes. Because yes. I think there are different levels and kinds of institutions which have different level of institutional support. You were in a place, as you said, a state university. I think the institutional support there is even less. And I know, Karishma, you mentioned once that you have to start by explaining to them what is grant management,
Yes, certainly.
To the admin staff.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I think really accepting that it is tough. I think this itself would make all of us, all 64 of us, feel better. So Rohan is attempting to join. Rohan is attempting to join.
Yeah.
We'll take that as a sign.
Sorry, we had a power cut.
No problem, Rohan. Are you back?
Yeah, I'm back. Yeah.
Okay, I held forth. You owe me. All right, over to you. So Anandita is going to start. We were just talking about fieldwork, equipment, and Durga
Right.
was saying how tough it is in most institutes. But maybe you could take off where Anandita says, how do you manage fieldwork, Anandita, with teaching and setting up a research group?
See, I joined in June, and thankfully it was summer, and I was scheduled to start teaching on 1st August. So I had a little bit of time to learn, what to do and what not to do. And trust me, I came from IIC where everything runs like clockwork. Everything is a system. You go to the office and dump your papers, things get done. And I came from a lab where, my supervisor had a series of people in his office who would help us with everything. So I didn't even know what an indent was. And the first thing that you start learning is, all the paperwork. And again, I joined an institute which was new. We were just setting up a research grants office. At one point of time, I was told that my grant, which I received after joining ISER, was the first CSIR grant that the institute had received. And they said, we made all the mistakes and that helped us learn a lot. Thank you, ma'am. This was like after they have bungled up my SEUC 3 times. And then they say, thank you, ma'am, we learned how to do a SEUC properly. So you can imagine what we went through. And I had no notion how to do it. So it was really a tough time. And the thing is, all of us were in the same soup. And most of us were young, and most of us were just, asking each other what to do. And there would be 1 or 2 senior faculty who would know everything and they would help us out. So unlike Durba, we did not have anyone who would help us do this. So when our colleagues started joining eventually, we started this hand-holding system because we didn't want them to go through the same thing. And in the middle of this, we didn't have a lab to set up because our campus hadn't even started. So we were sharing one space and 3 of us were setting up a lab there. So it was more like we were in a picnic, and in the middle of all of that, we are trying to do research and trying to teach and do a lot of things. But for me, actually, my biggest support system in the institute was the fact that my lab senior had joined from my PhD days, had joined here before me. And she was like being the big sister, hand-holding me through everything and giving me a space to sit and giving me a table and a chair and stuff when we came in. So in the middle of all of this, yes, I had to do field work, but then I thanked, my choice of working on dogs because I stepped out of the lab and there were dogs. So literally taking walks between buildings was field work for me.
And that you tried to purchase a cycle as lab field work requirements, and that just all it was just not okay in the system.
It's not okay. I was not
Nobody ever thought of
cycle.
Purchasing a bicycle for lab work.
Yeah,
right?
In fact, I had to, every time I wanted to buy a camera, we wanted to buy some camera for practicals, so lab equipment, and I wanted to buy a camera out of my CSIR grant. It was there in the grant. And I had to run to the office some 15 times to convince them that this is actually equipment, which was needed for my research. The worst was, when I had experiments set up in which we were giving biscuits to dog as reward. And they were like, why do your students buy biscuits? What do you do with it? I said, no, my students don't eat them. Don't worry, I'm using it for experiments. For me, it was almost a joke, They were like, oh, for my friend, she works on ants. So she routinely received the question, why do you need honey in the lab? And I routinely received a question saying, why do you need biscuits in the lab? And so we used to joke, we are eating biscuit and honey for tea, coffee, lunch every day. That is how we are using this.
Mentioning something you said, Anindita, about hand holding, and I said that too. And I think it's important to find mentors.
Nice.
And ISA Pune that came up next door, we were all fellows together. So apparently the first person who joined there who had a fellowship, we had someone in NCL. Basically, they took all the paperwork from here over there. And when I joined, they had forgotten, NCL had forgotten. And I got all the paperwork back from ISER into NCL, So mentorship is not just about your department, your division. your institute, it can be cross-institutional, it can be at multiple levels, it can be super senior faculty, or it can be people who have just joined with you. Your peers can be your mentors too, if they have something you want
In
to
fact,
learn from them.
between the few of us who had joined early on, we figured out how to conduct PhD interviews, because suddenly it was thrown at us, that, okay, now you have to conduct interviews for PhDs. Now we are setting up an integrated PhD program. You have to come up with a method in which you're going to select your integrated PhD students. And 1 month back, I was a PhD student myself, and now I'm sitting there conducting interviews. So we, sat over for long hours and decided what to do and what not to do and what works and what doesn't work. So all of that was kind of a learning exercise, because also I think in a way, when I look back, that it was interesting being in a new institute, because we gave inputs from everything, the plan of the labs to what renovations the toilet needs, to how to conduct PhD interviews, to the designing of the syllabus for lab experiments. Everything we were doing at the same time. And at the end of the day, when we went back home, often I would be like, okay, where did I do the science? Because I was just doing this all day. And for me, actually, it was like I felt like I'm never out of the institute, because my husband and I joined here together. And back home, we are also discussing, he is an experimental physicist, so he is going through his own exercise of setting up a lab, and both of us are okay, indents and purchase orders and bureaucracy is all that we are discussing over dinner. And then we are back here the next morning doing the same thing. So it was like part of our life at that point of time.
I think it becomes a part of your life, even if it's not that much, because, you can't get things done 9 to 5, and it just really becomes a part of your life. And, the whole work-life balance really does go out for a while. You can try to gain it back, but the first time is just, it has to be a part of your life. Otherwise, nothing will get done, because everything demands a chunk of time. So,
right. Yeah. Yeah. Moving on to an important aspect of all of our careers, basically, is publications, and keeping in mind the tenure process that has kicked in a lot of institutions now, it especially becomes important, to plan publications that are going to come out of your lab. Even though you are a young investigator, you're facing multiple challenges. You're setting up your research group and your research program. So having all that in mind, was there a strategy for planning the first publications that would come out from your lab? Was there a timeline that you all followed? And did you consider low-hanging fruits versus the high-hanging fruits in terms of the impacts that the publications would make? So was there planning behind that? This is for both of you.
For me, no. Again, my PhD training and the philosophy with which I did my PhD was very different. In fact, for a long time during my PhD, I had never heard of the term impact factor. And I heard about this from my friends in other departments. So, we did our PhD for fun, literally. And, the entire culture in the lab was think about the question, think about the science, the papers will happen. And that is the culture I came from. And being an ecologist, where you're used to publications happening after a lot of data has come in. And especially given that I was starting off on a system which was completely new. Nobody had ever worked on free-ranging dog behavior before me anywhere. And this was like a blank slate, and I was drawing the first lines on it. So I knew that I could do a lot of work, and whatever I did would be data, but then it was a lot more responsibility to ensure that everything is right, and I'm not just drawing conclusions based on a small data set. So I didn't even think about publications for the initially. And then we used to have these reviews of the young faculty. There would be the senior faculty sitting very gravely and asking you, how is your work going? So are you writing a paper? It's been a year. And they were like, all of these people I was very friendly with. We would meet over tea outside and all. And then suddenly they're sitting in the committee. They distance themselves from you and become this panel which is going to take you to task. And then one of them told me, I said, no, I'm an ecologist, I've just started. It's just been more 1.5 years. for us, data takes 4-5 years to come, and only then I'll think of papers. And then one of them told me, oh, when the dogs are sleeping, why don't you do something else? I was completely shocked. Is that a joke? Are you serious? No, what on earth are you asking me to do? And then they said, you should have main project and some side projects out of which you are going to get quick publications. And I said, no, I don't want to do it. This is already a lot of new stuff, and I don't want to go around doing other things just to pass time, because I want to put all my effort in this one thing that I'm doing. And I really faced a lot of flack because of that, but I stayed put, and I said, no, I'm not going to just get quick publications because that's needed. And my first paper publication from the lab took me 4 years, but I was happy with it.
Yeah, Durba. Yeah.
I think that's been a very different thing. So as you said, Anandita, you do face a lot of flack, and especially if you're on these tenure track positions or fellowships, that is where you are going to, be taking the next step, and very often if you don't have publications, multiple doors in front of you close, right? And this is especially if you're working in areas that are already quite populated. You need to be visible not just to the people who are evaluating you in your institutions, but also to the community as large, right? They may know you very well because you come from a large lab doing a large postdoc and you're quite visible. Often very large lab postdocs are all very visible. I mean, almost as much as young PIs themselves. And then suddenly you're lost because you've moved from Stanford or MIT into something in India. And there is no one who's going to wait for you to do that, So I do think that it needs you. Some people can be the exception, and Anandita, you are right there, but for most of us, we do need to consider it, and the people here, because you have to be really, really strong to put your case across in multiple ways, to say, no, this is what I want. And if not, it's just easier to go with the flow, right? So there are certain things in different places. And I think here, being in an institute which is with a very high chemistry focus, where there's a lot of publications every day, I didn't need to wait for the evaluators to be on the other side to tell me. They would catch me in corridors and in staircases and over chai and say, where's your paper, Well, Saurabh is a very good example of it. He would keep harassing us all day long. I'm like, I joined, it's 1 month. And he's like, no, I need to see something. And that comes to the low-hanging fruit versus the high-hanging fruit, So I had this collaboration that my student was, working with and all. And I said, no, that cannot be the low-hanging fruit because there's a lot of mentorship involved. There's a lot of discussions with collaborations and so on and so forth. And then there was this other part that I thought, okay, so it was in my proposal somewhere to make it stronger. And then I wasn't planning to do it. And then I thought, okay, why not? It is a low-hanging fruit. And that actually gave me such an interesting story. And I'm still working on it for 10 years. So while I started off on that project completely alone, I've had multiple students at different levels who joined me, who came because they wanted to work on this. And that has really been, it started off as a side project that no one talked about to becoming almost mainstream right now. And it is definitely the project that is currently getting a lot of visibility for the group, So there are different levels. It's still using similar techniques. It's still asking similar questions, like different parts of the jigsaw puzzle. So maybe one is here, one is there. In the long run, especially as a computational person, I have a very narrow focus. One day we will fit up the whole jigsaw puzzle. And so I just see them as different parts of the puzzle. And I thought that was important. And I thought that gave me a lot to learn about. I knew nothing about it, but I knew that there was something easy. So I was coming into a field where nobody had done that using techniques that I had developed. So I knew it was low hanging because, nobody other than me and my ex-boss knew that method, kind of a thing. And that just became so exciting, that got me to different parts of the world, that got me to maximum number of, collaborations, international collaborations. And it was just a side project that just became exciting. And I knew that would have something first off over there. So I think it is important. It is an elephant in the room, as Karishma said earlier, because we all want to, follow the science and follow our passion and do all of that. But unfortunately, sometimes, especially for people who are in these tenure track like fellowship like positions, it can get important.
No, I think the bottom line of all
Right.
of this, no one size fits all.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, no.
actually,
So after
depend on-
discussing how to identify focus areas to
So Rohan,
identifying
sorry, Anindita was saying something. Maybe there's a video lag.
Yeah, it looks like a lag.
Yeah. Rohan?
Yeah,
Can you hear
Anandita
us?
was saying, yeah, I can
Yes,
hear
yes.
you.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
so I was just saying that, a lot of this would actually depend on the kind of questions you're pursuing, the kind of science that you do. So, for example, somebody doing bioinformatics might find it easier to branch out into multiple collaborations because of the way you work, versus if I want to publish something on a quick data set, tomorrow I would perhaps realize that this is not working, this is wrong, and I'd rather not publish something unless I'm convinced about it, because the way things emerge in ecology is very different from how it works in some other field. And I think this is the point, that people who are sitting out there for evaluations also need to understand this, that not everybody works the same way. And unfortunately, that is what sometimes doesn't happen.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes.
So thank you, Durga, Anandita. And I particularly, this is something we did not anticipate as I'm sharing my slides again. Sorry about that, but did not anticipate that, oh, well, maybe we did. You both bring such different perspectives into all the questions. So I think we will say thank you both for that. And we will take a little bit of credit for that. We thought this would probably happen, and we wanted it to be so. We wanted to give diverse perspective. There is no one strategy. It depends, right? Whether it's publications, collaborations, tenure track versus fellowship versus whatever other situation you might be in, new institute, established institute. But I think the takeaways are that, well, I could say we are in this together. Lots of the anecdotes and experiences many of us could identify with. So thank you very much. We've lost Rohan again. We always seem to be doing this at critical times in the webinar, but we will wrap up now with saying thank you to Rohan, Anandita, and Durba. Thank you for your time and thank you for your engagement. Thank you all for being here and staying the whole 1 hour. We have 11 more hours to go. How's that? All right, but new topics and new guests and new interlocutors. So next week we will talk about research grant sanction orders. What do we need to know? And how can we work with a research or development office or a grants office to facilitate our grants and expenditures? So that sounds good. Thank you all very much. Once again, we have a feedback form in the chat window, and we will also send you an email shortly with the feedback form. So give us your suggestions, give us your feedback. We look forward to them. All right, so shall we wrap up?
Thank you, Karishma. Thanks for the invitation, and it has been really lovely being here.
Thank you, Anindita.
Yeah, thank you, Karishma. You did mention that other than me, the next other person is going to be a field biologist, and it was partly by design, I know. And I was trying to get some of the slightly wider ideas, because really there's only one way you can do it is by getting all the ideas and doing it. There is no one size that fits all, but it always helps to talk to different people. I knew you from a Ramalinga Swami conclave. I loved those conclaves. I know Anindita from some INEAS space, which also has so many amazing discussions and ideas. I know Rohan through a Pune Mumbai chapter. So just go out. I know there's less time, but go out into all these microcosms and try to talk and get together. I think that helps. And that's the thing for all, take home message for all the YIs here today.
And YI Huddle is one such microcosm that we are trying to build.
Exactly.
From the comfort of your offices.
Yes,
exactly.
We hope they are comfortable. All right. On that note,
Karishma, can we all take a picture with all the attendees?
Yes, I will stop share.
It will be great if all of you can, turn on your camera.
Very good to see you all. Thank you for being there. Manjula, do let us know when it's done. We're sort of...
I'm waiting for people to turn on the camera.
Yes,
I mean, if possible, we'll just yeah.
Sure. No, I'm just kidding. I'm saying we're all holding our breath.
Okay, please smile. Okay, I'm done. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Manjula. Thank you. And we couldn't answer all questions, but like I said, we have meetings to follow.